Hi and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm talking all things peperomia. I'm going to be showing you my full peperomia collection, and I'm also going to be talking about care requirements, and then finishing off this video talking about 2 ways that you can propagate your peperomia. Before we get into the video, hi, my name is Alexis and this is Wild Houseplants. I'm a houseplant enthusiast and I also work as a houseplant technician, which basically means when I'm not looking after my own plants, I'm looking after other people's. If you don't follow me over on Instagram, you can find me there at Wild Houseplants. And if you do enjoy this video today, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps out my channel. Okay, let's talk about peperomia. So this is the Peperomia prostrata, most commonly called the string of turtles. And I haven't had this one in my collection too long. I only actually bought it on a trip to Wales last month, but I've wanted one for such a long time, but I haven't seen one that I've liked that's got such a full basket like this. You can just see the top of the plant there, just how full it is. And it's currently flowering at the moment, which is what all these little fun things like dancing off it are. And I just think it's such a fun plant. And obviously you can see why it's called the string of turtles, because each little succulent disc has like a turtle shell pattern on it. And I just think it's such a fun plant, and they work really well as a trailing plant, and they will just sort of trail down like this. So this one is in this IKEA hanging planter, and I just have this hanging up in the skylight in my kitchen. And we are currently in June in the UK, but although it's actually currently blue skies and sun right now, we have had so much rain and we haven't had an awful lot of sun. So far it's quite happy in that skylight. If I noticed the plant was starting to fade and look a bit bleached or drying out very quickly, then I might realise that as the summer progresses, it might be a little bit too much light for it. And so I'll move it to a slightly more shaded spot. But these plants really love bright, indirect light and can tolerate some direct sun as well. But yeah, I just think it's such a fun plant and I just love having it in my collection. So I'm really happy to have it. Next up is the Peperomia Ferrare. I'm not entirely sure if I got that pronunciation correct, but we also call it the Peperomia Happy bean. And you can see why, because it looks just like a load of green beans on a branch, which I think is so fun and cute. And I actually hardly ever see this plant anywhere in plant shops. And also I very rarely see anybody talking about it on Instagram as well. So I don't know how common it is. I was given this as a gift by my mum 2 Christmases ago, and it came as actually quite a full plant, much more compact than it is now. It's got sort of much more branchy, but it had maybe 3 plants in the pot. And I think I must have watered it once and then all the stems started to rot, bar this one. And I got it out of here, and even the roots have started to rot on this one. So I basically put it into perlite in order to save it back. And it managed to grow some new roots, and then I was able to pot it back up. And now it's doing really well, although it has just recovered from a pretty bad thrip infestation. And I hadn't noticed that it had thrip, because sometimes thrip are much easier to see on like nice big expansive green leaf. But because these are like just little succulent beans, I just thought, one, that I didn't think thrip would be particularly interested in this plant. But yeah, I thought 2, it was just really hard to see them. So the infestation had got quite bad before I noticed. And I should have known, because I was looking at the plant thinking, gosh, why is it looking so sad? Why are some of these little beans going black and falling off? And normally that's a telltale sign for thrip, that the new growth will come in black, or it'll be deformed in some way, or the leaves will start to just look really unhealthy. And so I should have known, but I just didn't. And so anyway, the plant has now been treated and it is now happy and healthy, and the new growth looks really good. So that's a good one for this one. I have had this one growing previously in a south-facing window just here in my living room, and it definitely started to bleach out a little bit. The beans started to turn more of a yellow colour, and you definitely want them looking more nice and green. So I would say with this one, more of a sort of if you're going to put it near a south-facing window, to have it maybe 1 metre or so back. I don't think it likes direct sun, so more of a indirect light situation. And I think it could probably also handle medium light as well. But yeah, I just think it's a really fun and sort of great texture little plant. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, the Happy Bean. Of all the Peperomia in my collection, this is the one that I have struggled with the most. I would say it's probably one of the plants that's taken me the longest time to get my head around. And even when I think that I've got my head around it, it can sometimes just throw a fit on me and decide that it's not happy again. So yeah, with this one, it really is about trying to get the balance of watering right. I will talk about watering more generally when I talk about care requirements after I've shown you the full collection. But with this one, if you do not get the watering right, it can, well, mine did get quite bad edema, where you get these sort of brown and black marks on the back of the leaves. And I also had the leaves splitting. So yeah, it was a really difficult one. You can see that there's some like ripped sections of the leaves here. So I found it really hard to get the balance right with the watering so that it wasn't basically splitting, which is obviously not a good look at all. And then I was trying to give it more light so that these leaves would size up, but then it was throwing a bit of a fit about having too much light as well. So the solution that I've basically figured out now is I've taken it out of soil, and it's probably going to drip all over me because it's currently sat in a little reservoir of water, but it's now in semi-hydro. So this one is in Lechuza pond. And basically Peperomia have a very, very fine root system, and they can rot very easily if you don't get that watering right. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. But I found that actually, because they, when they're in semi-hydro like this, they can sort of get the constant access to moisture that they need without sitting in a lot of wet, heavy soil. And that seems to be, so far, this is the happiest this plant has been in a really long time. It's giving me some really beautiful leaves that don't have any splitting on them. And yeah, there's lots of new growth coming in down here as well. And because I was struggling a little bit with how much light to give it, I've now actually got it under a grow light. And it's not the main plant under that grow light. So I have one of the Pianta grow lights from Growgang, which is over my Monstera albo. And this just sits below. So it's getting some of the light from that grow light without getting like blasted with too much light. So I will just check how many foot candles it's getting, and I'll pop that on the screen. But yeah, I absolutely love this plant. So I don't want to give up on it. And it hasn't died. You know, it's just been it's had moments where it's had very few leaves, and then it's bounced back, and then it's gone down to a few leaves. But I'm hoping I've now found the right balance with it being in semi-hydro, and the fact that it's putting out lots of new growth now and looks really healthy, and has stopped splitting. I'm thinking that I'm definitely on the road to understanding this plant a lot better. But yeah, if you see one of these, definitely pick one up. But they are a bit of a challenge to get to know. So yeah, Peperomia watermelon. Next up is the Peperomia pepper spot. And this is another one that I don't really see around very much. I don't see many people talking about it. I originally saw it over on Samantha's page from House Plus Plant. And yeah, I just thought it looked really, really cute. I thought the texture was really lovely. And when it sits like this in my bedroom, and when it's just been watered and the sun is out, all these little new bits of growth like shoot outwards, and it's super cute. This is another one where basically when I went to the shop, they had like lots of little plants, and I wanted to make a fuller plant quite quickly. So I've talked about this before, that if I see a plant that's quite small and I'm looking to maybe make a full display, and I don't want to wait for that plant to size up, I just bought 4 and potted them all together in the same pot. And at the time it was probably just like here, and now it's trailing all the way down to here. But it just means that the top of the pot here has a much more full display, and it's grown really, really well. This one sits in my bedroom, just right next to a south-facing window, but the way that the light works and the fact there's houses directly opposite means that it's probably getting bright indirect light, but not very much direct sun, and it's super, super happy. This is another one that you want to wait for it to be probably about 80% dry before you water it. And again, similar with the string of turtles, you can just sort of feel the leaves, and if they feel quite full, you can see that there's obviously still quite a lot of water in there. And if they start to feel quite soft and flexible, then you'll know that this plant is in need of a water. But yeah, this is one, like I say, I don't see much around. It's got these lovely red stems, and I just think it's lovely texture, looks great trailing down, and yeah, one to look out for. Up next is this one, a firm favourite I feel in the houseplant community. This is the Peperomia Hope, and it's got these just succulent little coin-shaped leaves that are just so cute, and it is probably one of my favourite houseplants. This one got really long a few months ago, and I cut it back quite ferociously to propagate it, which I'll talk about later on when I'm talking about propagation. And then it didn't put out any new growth for a really long time, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? But now it's just putting out all these little new shoots now, and there's lots of little new shoots coming in down here, and all this beautiful little new growth coming at the end of the stems now as well. So it's just such a cute plant. I really do adore it, and it's not the easiest one to propagate, this one. It has taken me a few attempts to get it right, or what I would say is I will cover it when I do propagation, but it's just a bit of trial and error with this one. But I 100% think this is one that everyone should have in their collection, because they're really affordable. I think you can get like a small little pot for like £12 or something like that. I definitely bought this as a small plant, and it's just sort of grown into itself. I didn't buy 2 plants for this one or anything like that. And I just think it looks really cute trailing off a shelf. And yeah, I just love this one so much. So Peperomia Hope. And the last one I have in my collection is the Peperomia Raindrop. And as you can see, it's got the most beautiful, perfect heart-shaped leaves. And this one is actually 2 plants that I've combined together. And this one is quite a special plant to me, because when I got married last year, we actually decided to do houseplant wedding favours. So basically everybody got a cutting of this Peperomia Raindrop, and I sort of tucked it into the napkin. I can put some videos on the screen of what I did. I did do a reel on it, and it's actually been my most sort of viral reel I've ever done. It got quite a lot of attention, and yeah, it's a really nice idea. And I actually took that idea from a reel I saw on Hilton Carter's page, where he used the Peperomia watermelon and basically did it for Christmas decorations for part of his like Christmas festive table. And I saw that and I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice that I could give everyone a cutting of a plant that they can take away, grow on, and always remember the day. And then I was thinking about, what sort of cuttings could I use? And what's so great about Peperomia is that you can actually take just a cutting, a stem and a leaf, and it will actually put out new roots just from a stem cutting. You don't need to have a node or anything like that, which made it really easy for me to insert it into these little floral tubes, which tuck perfectly into the napkin. As I say, I'll put lots of descriptions on the screen and videos and stuff, and I'll talk about it a little bit more during propagation as well, and show you the floral tubes that I used. But yeah, for that reason, this plant has a lot of special memories for me, and obviously I wanted to keep 2 for myself. So 1 because I liked it, and 2 because I can always remember that these were part of my wedding day. So yeah, these ones sort of grow like they've got like sort of like a stem shooting up. So they sort of grow upwards, which I quite like. And then the hearts tend to sort of go off like that. So I think as long as you keep it happy and don't overwater it, this one can look like a really nice display. And I'm intrigued to see how it continues to grow, if it's just going to keep going up and up. If it does, I'll need to support it a little bit similar how I do with my Peperomia, where the mother stalk starts to get quite heavy. You do need to support it. So yes. This one is actually from IKEA. IKEA were like pumping these plants out, and so I managed to pick them up for like, each one was £8, which I think is a pretty good deal. So yeah, Peperomia Raindrop. Really like these ones too. Okay, so I've come back into the kitchen because quite frankly I was getting dead legs sitting on the floor, to talk about Peperomia care requirements before we go on to talk about propagation. So when it comes to watering, there are 2 things that I do to find out whether my plant is ready for a water. And obviously, the longer you have plants in your collection, you'll get used to it, and you'll sort of get to know in your head, okay, I generally water this plant every 10 days, for example. But I never like to say, oh, you should water this plant every 7 to 10 days, because where I live in the world and where you live in the world, the time of year, the type of potting medium you're using, humidity levels, temperature, there are so many different things that are interchangeable. And so I don't even water this plant the same all year round. So I'm not about to tell you to do the same. I always like to tell you a little bit about the care requirements in my home. So I live in London. The humidity in London generally sits around about 50 to 60% all year round. So we are reasonably humid, and I don't provide any extra humidity in my home by way of humidifiers or pebble trays or anything like that. I do group my plants together, however, and that obviously does create a little bit of extra humidity. When it comes to watering requirements with these, this is how I tell if my plant is a water or not. So the first thing you can do is get yourself a wooden skewer, stick it down into the soil, if you've got your plant in soil, that is. I do have some in semi-hydro, so I'll talk about that as well. Stick it down into the soil, twist it around, oops, pull it out. And as you can see with this one here, there is lots and lots of wet soil stuck to this wooden skewer, which should be right because I watered this plant about 2 days ago. So yeah, you can see there's still lots and lots of wet soil there. So I wouldn't water this plant. I normally let my peperomia dry out around about 80%. So if I was to water that, if I was to stick the wooden skewer into this plant and it had wetness down to about there, then I would probably give it a water. Although I have let these plants completely dry out before, and they are quite forgiving as long as you don't let that go on too long. So yeah, let them dry out around about 80%. The other way to tell if your peperomia needs a water, and this is definitely true of all the ones that I have in my collection, is, as I said previously, they are quite like succulent-y, the leaves. So if you just give them like a feel with your fingers, if they feel quite firm, then that's the plant's way of saying that there is still quite a lot of moisture and quite a lot of water in this leaf. If the leaf starts to feel quite floppy, quite soft, you can easily manipulate it, then there is very little water left in the leaves, and that is a sure way of saying, mate, can I have some water please? And that's the same with the Peperomia Hope. I'll just feel these leaves, and I would say make sure it's one of the older leaves, not one of the brand new ones, because the new leaves are always going to be a little bit softer than the more mature leaves. So find yourself one of the older leaves, feel it between your fingers. If it feels firm, there's still plenty of water in the plant. If it feels soft and floppy, then 100% give that a really, really good soak. I like to take my plants to the sink or put them over a bowl and give them a really thorough soak through from the top to the bottom. And then I will literally tip, I'll use it with this one here. I'll literally then go side to side with my nursery pot just to make sure all the water is drained out before I pop it back in its decorative pot like that. And then I'll wait again and check on it maybe in 7 days or 10 days. And then I'll feel the leaves, I'll check the soil and see how we're going. Because obviously I'm going to be watering more when we're in the summer months and less in those colder months. But even though right now we're in June and we've had so much rain and not a lot of sun, so you can't predict anything. You can't really water on a schedule. You just have to see what's going on with the weather and just, water accordingly, basically. But yeah, test the leaves, check the soil, and then you'll know whether you need to water or not. When it comes to light, I would say these guys prefer that bright indirect light, medium light bracket. I will take some readings with my light meter and just see what kind of measurements my plants are actually getting, and then I'll put that on the screen just to give you an idea. But I would say probably in that sort of 200 to 500 foot candles bracket ideally, but there are going to be times when they're getting less and times when they're potentially getting more. I just wouldn't say any prolonged periods of direct sun, because you will see that the leaves will bleach. I think I did mention earlier that this one was in a south-facing window and it really started to get quite bleached and yellow. And now I've moved it to a bright spot, but just not in direct sun. It's looking much greener and healthier. So yeah, if you notice your plants starting to dry out very quickly and also get quite bleached, then that's a surefire way that your plant is saying, please can I have a little bit less light. As I said, in terms of humidity, I don't provide any extra humidity in my home. But as I say, my home generally sits somewhere between 50 and 60% humidity. Of course, if we get a particularly dry spell, it's going to dip a little bit into maybe the 40s. And if we have a lot of rain like we've been having recently, it could be quite easily, the room humidity could be quite easily be 70+%. So yeah, I don't find the need that I have to supplement with any additional humidity. And to be honest, it's not something I want to do. I've got enough stuff going on with my plants. I don't need another machine in my house. So yeah, humidifiers are not for me. Yeah, and let's talk about soil or semi-hydro. So these plants generally work well in both soil or semi-hydro. What I would say is, despite having these quite succulent leaves and quite succulent stems as well, Peperomia have a very, very fine root system, and therefore they are particularly prone to root rot. If you overwater your Peperomia, if you water it too frequently or before the plant is ready and it's sat in a lot of wet soil for too long, it is very likely that plant is going to get root rot and you're going to lose the plant. And these plants do go downhill quite quickly once they do have root rot. And what will happen is that root rot will spread to the stem, the stems will start rotting, and then we basically lost the plant. So you do need to sort of act quite quickly if you do notice that you have got root rot. So yeah, that's why I always think it's a really good idea to make sure you're checking the leaf, and the leaf is telling you that it's ready for a water before you water, because you really do not want to be watering too frequently for those roots. Now, when it comes to soil, I use my general chunky mix. So this is cocoa coir, perlite, and there's a little bit of orchid bark and leca in this one as well. But this one particularly is more on the, it's probably got more of the coir in there, more of those moisture retentive properties. But I have this one in a very, very chunky mix. You can see at the top there, it's got lots of leca and perlite and bark. And so, yeah, just because of the root system, you want to make sure that it's not in a very dense, heavy soil mix that's going to stay wet for too long or take too long to dry out. I generally repot all of my plants after a period of acclimation to my home. The string of turtles that I showed you earlier, I've only had that for a month, so that one I haven't repotted. And also I really dread repotting that because those little turtle shells are so fragile that I would probably lose half the plant just trying to repot it. So that's like one of the few times when I'll basically put off a repot. As long as the plant seems happy, I might leave that one until it really needs it, because I think I could probably end up doing more harm than good. But yeah, as long as I'm making sure that I'm sticking my skewer into the soil and making sure it's 80% dry before I water it, it should be fine in the mix that it's in. But generally, yeah, avoiding that root rot situation is making sure you've got a nice chunky mix. And then if you are watering a little bit too frequently, or you do water too frequently one time, the plant's more likely to forgive you because it's got lots of aeration in the soil. I do also have these two plants in semi-hydro. So this is the watermelon peperomia that I talked about earlier, which I told you I was having lots of issues with, and I now think we've come to a happy place. But you can see in there's lots of fine roots in that semi-hydro. But this one's getting it sits in about maybe 2 centimeters of water. And I let the reservoir dry out, and then I'll top it up again. And that's been keeping this one much happier. I also did the same with this one. I decided to move it into semi-hydro. This is in a chunky, the coarse mix from Soil Ninja, which I love. I love it because it doesn't fall out the drainage holes. Lechuza Pond, or the fine semi-hydro mix from Soil Ninja, it's brilliant, but it does tend to fall out the drainage hole, so it's a little bit more messy. But I love this coarse one. And again, since I've moved it into here, there's lots of nice healthy roots in there, and the plant's been really happy. So I think both soil, chunky mix and semi-hydro can actually work for these plants. So yeah. When it comes to propagating your peperomia, if you have one like the Peperomia Raindrop or the Peperomia Watermelon, I've done propagation reels on both of these ones before. So there is two ways that you can do it. The first one is that you can literally take a stem cutting like this, cut it off like that, and you can stick that into a shot glass of water, a small vessel of water, and it will take a while, but eventually you will see little roots coming out the bottom here. So you don't need a node like you would with like a pothos or a philodendron or something like that. You can just propagate it directly from a stem cutting like this. I would say before you pop it into water, just let this callus over for a couple of hours so it's not still wet to the touch, and that will reduce your risk of this rotting basically. So just let it callus over a little bit, let it dry out, and then stick it in a small vessel of water. You don't want it in a massive vase of water. Just keep it in a small vessel of water and then be patient. Put it in a bright spot and you will start to see roots coming out. And this is what I've got going on here. These are just the little floral tubes that I mentioned that I did when I did the houseplant wedding favours for my wedding. So I took a stem cutting like this, placed it in the water, and as you can see there's lots of little roots that have formed here all the way along the stem and at the bottom as well. And I've got another one I can show you here as well. These little floral tubes I actually bought on Amazon. I can link them down below if you're wanting to do something like that for a wedding or even like a dinner party. It's a really nice gesture for someone to go away with a little gift at the end of the night. And these are actually ready to pot up now. So now that they've got their little root system, you can pop this into soil, and in time it will just produce little leaves and you'll get a whole new plant that's formed. So it's not the quickest way to propagate, but it is a way to propagate. And yeah, so that's the first one, taking a stem cutting. The second one is you would get your stem here, cut it off here at the base. You're just left with a leaf like this, and then you're going to cut this leaf in half like that, and then you get some damp soil and you're going to stick it cut side down into the damp soil. You could also do this with damp perlite as well, and most probably moss, although I haven't tried it with moss. I've just never got around to doing that because soil works well and perlite works well. But you literally just pop them down in there, and I will, if you go over onto my Instagram page as well, I do have a whole reel where I talk you through this process. Stick it down into the soil, keep that soil damp but not super wet. So I would just spray the top of the soil with like a spray bottle of water just to keep it damp, but you don't want to be constantly watering it. That's you're going to again increase your chance of getting these rotting. But place them down into the soil and then just wait. You might also want to put it in like a glass cloche, or maybe cover it with some cling film. That's just going to keep the humidity in. It's just going to speed up the process of propagation. And then what you'll start to see, these will put roots down into the soil, which you won't see, but you'll start to see little teeny tiny leaves pop up. It's so cute. I'll put some pictures in here. And then once you've got that, you can actually, once they've sort of got to a decent size, the new leaves, you can take that and plant them up. And eventually this will die off and you can get rid of this. But often when you buy one of these plants, especially the watermelon peperomia, if you look into the soil, you'll most likely see that there are leaves like this, and that's how this plant has been propagated. So yeah, stem cutting, and the roots will form from the bottom, and then you can pop it up. But this technique I think is quicker, and I also think you get like leaves quicker. So I would say if you want to get results quicker, then I would go with one like this. For the Peperomia Hope, you could also cut the leaf in half, but these leaves are quite small, and so in this case I've decided just to do it more as cuttings, stem cuttings that I've put into water. And you can see, got lots of little roots. So these are all ready to be potted up now. They've been in water a really long time, like definitely overdue to be potted up, but I just haven't got round to doing it. Lots of roots there. And you can see also, this one's put out a little shoot there as well. Super cute. So yeah, what I would say is there is always a chance with all propagations that your stem is going to rot. And so I would take multiple cuttings so that you've got more chance of getting 1 or 2 that work. Obviously here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they've all rooted, and I probably took 10. So I'd say 3 rotted and the rest survived. So it's always worth just, you know, taking a few so that you've got some, you know, backups, because there's always, you know, a few that might not work, might not take, and that's okay. So yeah, I think that's really everything I have to say about Peperomia today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do have any questions, please pop them down in a comment below. And if you have your favourite Peperomia, I'm always looking for ones to add to my collection. I know there are so many more out there. I have owned some others in the past, especially early on in before I really even got into plants, the ones that you can buy in the supermarkets you see quite readily. I can put some pictures in here. And I really love those, and I would like to get those back in my collection as well, but I'm running out of space. It's all getting a bit overcrowded with plants at the moment, so I'm on a bit of a plant ban at the moment. But yeah, let me know your favourite Peperomia below, and if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video. See you later.